Let's get ready to rumble.
Yes, we're back to episode 137 of Hibs Ramble. Welcome back, listeners. We've got a very, very special episode for you all tonight. I'm your host, as always, Liam, and I'm joined by Mr. High Football IQ, Craig Leach. And we've also got, he's here, he's there, he's every fucking where, Ivan Sproule. How on earth are you, mate?
I'm good. As I said, away from football now for a wee while. So as I said, it's just one of those things that you're trying to fill your life in now outside football. But no, I'm keeping really good. I have 3 boys now that keep me very active. They're all playing football now, and spend my time running around after them as a taxi service. So no, I'm filling on my days rightly. But as I said, no, you miss the game yourself. But listen, it's lovely to speak to people like yourself and come on and be able to do this. And I've done this a number of times for different Hibs things, and it's always been nice to, all those years later, be able to speak to people and reminisce on some of the memories.
Yeah, well, I think you're very, very highly thought of at the club and within the fans and everything. Craig, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I can't lie, I've been absolutely buzzing for this all day. As you well know, Liam, I can be a bit of Rain Man when it comes to Hibs in certain periods, and it just so happens that Ivan's spell at Hibs is one of those periods. There's also something really personal for me with you, Ivan. I want to touch on when we get to something later. So, no, it's brilliant to have you on. I'm buzzing, absolutely buzzing. I feel like that wee laddie with my autograph book again, sitting with one of my heroes.
Me too.
Well, I'm delighted to be here for you.
Brilliant. So just a little bit of news that we need to touch on before we get started. We were obviously very, very saddened to hear of the passing of Rod Petrie this morning. A man who did so much for our football club. Ivan, you were talking to us off air about how much he was, how much he helped you in your first move and your second move, and you know you got to know him really, really well off the pitch. And it's just a very, very sad day for everyone connected with the club.
I think it is. I think the one thing that stands out for Hibs is, you know, the word family, and it's always been echoed around, and that doesn't be used lightly with Hibs. As I said, you kind of, once you're part of it, once you're in, and that's it. And Rod certainly was one of those people that made me feel part of the family. And sometimes you can play for football clubs and as I said, just pass through, but that never was the case. We got to know people like Rod Petrie, Sheila Kinghorn, people like that. You know, yeah. I can remember when we used to change at the ground, and then you went round, to the far side where the chairman worked and the office staff, and that was one of the things that I liked. You got to know different people within the club, not just the football people. And I remember when I first signed, and again, this young lad that came from Northern Ireland and probably didn't know anybody, and you know, Rob was one of the ones that sorted us out with our flat and gave me my first deal. And you know, whenever I signed my new deal, it was through Rod. And any problems you had, you dealt with Rod. And I can remember when I left Hibs to go to Bristol City. You know, it was a big decision to go and play in the Championship and probably try crack England. And Rod never stood in my way. You know, Rod was one of the ones that, when we spoke about that summer, that he understood the reasons why. And I'll never forget driving to Wembley to go and play in the playoff final against Hull, and my phone rung going to Wembley, and it was Rod Petrie. And Rob was ringing to wish me all the best on that day. And, you know, just for someone to think about me after I'd left the club, and it was, you know, that always stands out to me. And I remember when we won the League Cup final, Rod come and sat with my family at the table, and we had a few drinks, and he just made time for people. You know, he just was a normal man, but you could see the passion that he had for Hibs, and that's something that I always stand by. If you know people within the club that have that passion and hunger and drive and love, you'll do the same. So he was a remarkable man, and I was lucky enough that I had 2 spells at Hibs, and when I signed and came back, it was fantastic. You know, he was the one that brought me back. I can remember sitting at Ormiston in the training ground, and I'd done the deal with him, and you know, one of the stories I'll come to was when I left the club. You know, it was a very difficult time for me because obviously there was an issue I had with probably not playing and the manager at that time. And then I remember standing with him and Sheila Kinghorn in his office, and I'm not going to lie, I stood and cried because it tore me between, because I didn't want to leave the club, but I understood I didn't want to stay around and be that person that was unhappy around a football club that meant so much to me. And I can remember Rod and Sheila almost standing crying with me when I left and leaving his office. And you know, and one thing that always stands out to me, he always says to me, he says, "Ivan, you've left your memories." And and you'll always be welcome here. And those words always echoed with me. And I can remember driving away in the car, and I don't know. My wife says to me when I come into the house, "What happened to you?" I thought you were happy leaving, but leaving people like Sheila Kinghorn, Rod Petrie, and the club at that time. Rod was, the way that he dealt with things was, he just had a gentle touch, and you knew that Hibs was his club, and he knew that he loved the club. And as I said, very, very, very privileged and honoured to work under someone like Rod Petrie.
Yeah, well, you weren't the only one crying when you left, Ivan. I'm pretty sure I shed a few tears as a wee guy as well. Craig, from a fan's perspective, it's a tough one, because Rod was always in and about the fans. At the old behind the goals, he was there every week, more or less. Chatting with the supporters and stuff, and he was always kind of mixing and trying to, get round everybody. Like Ivan says, it's just horrible to lose someone who obviously thought so much of the club and loved the club so much. Yeah,
I mean, you look at it from a fan's perspective. If it wasn't for him and Tom Farmer, we're probably not sat here with Ivan today. He's I know he came in quite a lot. It was like 5 or 6 years after Tom saved the club, but you just need to look around the place, the stadium, the training facility. That's Rod Petrie's legacy.
Yeah.
He took his fair share of stick for supporters. I was one of them, because, like Ivan says, Ivan sees that personal side to him. All we see is the sort of business side, and we're thinking, spend money on players. Why are we not buying players? Why are we this? Why are we that? And then you look at the bigger picture over time, and I was seeing that, I don't know if you've read it, but David Forsyth wrote a lovely piece on the website for him, and the story about how in the last couple of years of his life, he was sort of undercover as a paying fan going to watch the club. And I think that speaks volumes for him. Like you say, he was always, for all the criticism and all the sort of ire that was directed at him by supporters, he never shied away. He was, like you said, he'd done the rounds on match days. He was always in behind the goals. It wasn't as if he was sticking to the hospitality section where he might have got a bit of an easier ride. He was in with the punters and behind the goals, walking around the stadium. And yeah, I think history will reflect very well on Rod Petrie's tenure at the club. Like I say, the legacy is there, and he was the custodian, effectively the custodian of the club when we finally won the Holy Grail. And yeah, it's just a very sad day for everybody connected with the club.
That's a really sad day.
That's now Sir Tom and Rod following on for Ron's passing as well.
Yeah, very, very sad. Well, let's turn the mood up a little bit. We've got some quick fire questions for you, Ivan, just to kind of break the ice and get you ready to get into this episode of the Ramble. So, first off, who had the best haircut and the worst haircut of your whole playing career? Who can you remember that had a brutal hairdo, and who had the best?
Well, Dick's always had the wee pink. Derek Reardon, or not the pink, he always had the wee blonde, but then the wee puff. I never could quite get over Dick's haircut, but he liked it, and he scored goals, so if it worked for him, it worked for me.
I think you had a lot of wee guys in Edinburgh that were kicking about with the blonde mohawk.
Dick set the trend at that time. I don't know whether it was the best or the worst.
Well, I was one of those wee guys that had it. Trust me, it was worse.
I know,
but
Dick was a trendsetter, and as I said, he was a big Hibs man, and a lot of ones followed him. So I'm going to give Dick's the tie in that. I'm going to give him the best and the worst. Give a man for the both.
Can you remember the worst team talk, or the one that you got an absolute rollicking in? Who gave you that?
Listen, as I said, I was quite fortunate, in my tenure there, with Tony, and then I had left, and John Collins come in, and they were managers that, again, probably, John or Tony probably. Tony was a real good manager. I think for me and Tony, that was the period where I was learning, and I think Tony was the one that chipped the edges off. Like, I knew where I was at as a footballer when I arrived, and he done wonderful things for me. John was the same. John was a high standard setter. And then, as I said, Colin Calderwood signed me and brought me back up. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for Colin. And Pat came in. Worst team talks. I never really got it off managers in that way. I always felt, even when you have a bad game, like, there's nobody plays well all the time. But I think as long as the effort's there and you're trying, I think you'll always get away with it. A manager will see through you if you're not trying. And the one thing that I would always hold my head up high on is, no matter, I'm sure there's bad games that people remember, and there's certainly games that I felt as if I didn't deliver myself in a Hibs shirt at times, but the one thing that I could always say when I come off the park, it wasn't for the lack of effort. So never really got a rollick into that demeanour, but as I said, that didn't say that I didn't deserve one now and again.
Next up, who had the worst patter out of all your teammates across your career?
Worst patter.
Lee Johnson up there, surely.
Who's that?
Lee Johnson, surely is up there.
Jono was it? Well, Jono didn't really play it, but he was down at Bristol studying with me, and as I said, I had a few players throughout my career that you probably were moody and grumpy and whatever. But no, again, trying not to throw anybody under the bus too much. It's I always felt that the teams that I played with, that your teammates become your family, and good players, and you can't always have the same kind of personalities. But for me, I never had any bother with any of my teammates. As I said, I found myself a really straight up guy, and if I had anything to say, I said it to them, and they probably felt that was probably the best honest policy with me. But I never really couldn't really say that anybody had bad patter or didn't really get on with anyone. So no, as I said, that's a question probably I couldn't really even give you an answer on.
I could tell you who's got the worst patter at the Hibs Ramble, and it is me.
By a mile, country mile.
What's your karaoke song?
Listen, I was over in Edinburgh. Good friends obviously become the club have looked after me since I've left, and I've been over maybe once or twice every year and doing different events. And I was over at the Happy Buzz event there with Boozy, and done a talk, and then ended up going back to stay at the Black Ivy. And I think Frankie Mack was doing. He was in the Black Ivy that night, so I got up and done a bit of a karaoke number with him. I think if you go online, you'll find it. So done the House of the Rising Sun, done Sunshine and Lease. So no, the House of the Rising Sun. My dad used to be in a band years ago, used to sing. So the House of the Rising Sun with Animals seems to be my song. And then again, I suppose now over here, I'm connected with Hibs, and the Proclaimers always be through out there and listen. Sunshine and Lights, but no, my go-to karaoke song is The Animals, The House of the Rising Sun.
Love it. What's your favourite cheat meal?
Cheat meal, again, now I can cheat a wee bit more now that I'm not, well, I say I'm not playing, I'm still playing at 44, still pulling the boots on for the wee local side here, and managed and the championship over here, and back playing again. I've always kept myself fit, but eating's one of my best hobbies now, and I like it. So no, if I can get away with a cheat meal, I like a good steak.
Oh, aye. It's not even really that bad as well.
No, a steak, and if you're looking something probably a bit more cheaty, so we'll probably go with Chinese.
God, that's what we wanted to hear. That's what we wanted to hear. A nice wee bit of salt and chili chicken.
With everything, there's nothing that I don't like.
And then just finally, what's your guilty pleasure movie or TV series?
Funny, I sat with my wife last night, and we sat. And I'm not a big TV fan. I don't really sit and watch episodes and stuff. But I watched Happy Gilmore 2 last night.
What did you think?
And I just sat and split my side. That's my kind of humour. Nothing too serious. I like just good fun, and there was tears in my eyes last night sitting watching that. And it reminisced me in the old one. So no, I like comedy, and I like light-hearted stuff. As I said, I was a serious player on the pitch, but off the pitch I like to be a wee bit more light-hearted, and I liked, as I said, there's nothing better than getting a good laugh now and again.
Nah, I quite enjoyed Happy Gilmore too. Have you seen it, Chris?
I've watched like the first half an hour. I think I got to the part where he gets like ambushed when he's working in the grocery shop or something. I think I've made it to there. I've just never. It's one of those ones you stick on and you fall asleep and you never seem to get back round to watching it.
No, never. As I said, whenever you were a player, that's the thing. You were in a hotel a lot, especially when I played down in England for the 4 years in the Championship. It was relentless. It was Saturday, Tuesday, recover, hotel Friday. So you spent a lot of time in hotels. So I have an old DVD collection out in the garage that I could do a video shop, to be honest with you, because that's what you used to do. I remember going to Ocean Terminal even when I was at Hibs. And the life of a footballer back then was like, you were finished at maybe 2, 3 o'clock. You came home, you bought a movie, you went and bought a movie, you come in, you watched it that night. And so again, I've some old classics out there as well, DVDs. But No, listen, movies and stuff like that now, with my three boys, I don't get as much time, but back when you're a footballer and even an international team in Northern Ireland, you were away for 10 days, it was DVD after DVD.
No, so that's our quickfire questions done. I want to kind of take it back to growing up and what your football background is. Obviously, you played with Omagh and Institute before you came over to Hibs. How did you get into football? Was it something that you did through school? Was it your old man that got you into it, or?
It would have been my dad, my late dad. Again, dad was obviously, we were always a footballing family. And my late brother, my big brother was killed in a car accident when he was 18. I was only 10 at the time, 11 when he had passed away. But when he was 18, he had won kind of like the League Cup over here, the equivalent in Northern Ireland. And I can always remember as a boy standing on the terrace watching him in this big final. And it kind of give you, when I'm bigger, I want to do that. And I remember my dad getting up on the bus for me. So you're always took away on a Saturday to either go and watch him, my big brother, or go and watch my dad, the earlier memories. So it was always in the blood. And started off with my local side, then Dergview, and then progressed up through the Irish League ranks to Omagh and Institute. And as I said, there's some fantastic coaches and managers. And over here in Northern Ireland, football's really progressing on. Even if you take a look at the European results for Linfield and St. Pat, even League of Ireland, there's a lot of Larne, there's a lot of teams over here doing really well, and there's a lot of money being spent. But back when I was playing, maybe not so much. The infrastructure maybe wasn't as strong. So, there's a lot of players going across the water now from Northern Ireland and the League of Ireland. But just again, I suppose like any boys club around Edinburgh, Glasgow, anywhere, I had a lot of people that played, a big part in my career at an early stage. And I suppose I was very small as a youngster, very quick but very small. So it took me a wee bit more time to progress. And sometimes I always share that with young lads over here. Sometimes we develop at different ages. And just because you're smaller or weaker doesn't mean that you'll not grow into something. So, no, listen, that was my platform through, and worked my way up kind of from junior football right up into the Irish League, and got to the Irish League, and then, as I said, then it ended up, the move came across to go across to Hibs. So, some cracking memories, played the likes of the Milk Cup, and never really was capped at schoolboy level. Always felt that, you have grapes. I live really, probably a wee bit more rural in the countryside, and sometimes we always thought that the Belfast boys were the boys that always get picked, and the wee village boys never get a look in. So it was nice for me to go full circle and not even have a cap as a youngster, and feel aggrieved in that, and then end up going and go straight into the national team as a senior player. And I was one that probably shouted about that when I did do it, that there was more talent lying around rural areas, where now Connor Bradley's from my village. And now look at the superstar he's went on to become, an absolute, gem of a player, and probably now one of the most exciting up-and-coming young players in the Premier League. So it's nice for young players from around my area in Castlereagh and County Tyrone to be able to go now and inspire other youngsters to go and do what we did, or I did, and he's now currently doing.
So do you think it's difficult then to sort of juggle the playing football and having a job as well? I don't know if it's still... the teams that you played for, Omagh and Institute, if they're still part-time. But what was that like for you to have to juggle two different...
It was difficult because, again, I was a fabricational engineer, so I was building crusher and screening machines and doing that 5 days a week, and then going at night and training 2 or 3 nights a week. And listen, it's graft, but the one thing I think it did for me, it grounds you. It lets you see what it's like to get up with your lunchbox and a Monday morning and go out and earn a straight day's graft and put a graft in. And I always says that sometimes footballers go across the water at 17, 16 and are back again between their 22, because sometimes I think they get it, not saying too easy in academies. I don't know if they've got the hunger and the bite for it. And I always say that my career and my pathway, whether people agree with it or not, I think the fact that I probably didn't get across, and I had that work ethic, and I had that, I suppose, humbleness more than anything. And then when I did get the opportunity, I was hungry for it. I put a bit of extra bite and drive into me, and then when I did get the chance, then I was making sure then that it wasn't wasted, and I could try and take the best advantage of it. So, but back to your original question, it is a difficult thing to do, to balance the both. But I think if you really want something bad enough, you've got to. There's people out there, and I'm not downgrading footballers, but working harder than footballers that are probably trying to put food on their table every day. And you know, I always go back to everyday life. There's people out there with bigger challenges than I suppose trying to make it as a footballer, and I always go back to that, like nurses and doctors and hard work. But hard work's part of life. I always tell my young kids.
I mean, I try my hardest as well. I don't work anywhere near as hard as a footballer, and
I don't work anywhere near as hard at all.
I suppose our pay reflects that though.
Yeah.
And then the move kind of comes about of you coming over to Hibs. How did it sort of come about, and was there any other interest in you? Was there any other teams that could have turned your head?
At that time, it was again. It all happened. It was around the Irish Cup was about to start over here, and I was with Institute at the side, and I remember I was out again back to part-time football. We were out the side of the pitch because we had nowhere to train. It was kind of a few floodlights through outside the pitch, and we were skipping, and we had a new French manager at Institute, and I was trying to skip, and the teammate that I had at the time, I'll say no names, I don't know what he was on that night, but let's just say he couldn't skip. And I wasn't very good at the skipping as well, so this French coach, well, he thought everybody should be able to skip, so there was an argument because of not being able to skip. Basically, it's the randomest, craziest story you'll ever hear, and I'm sure a few Hibs people would know I have a bit of at sometimes a short fuse. So my skipping rope was through, and I says, I'm not doing this anymore, and I stormed off. So I was put up for transfer, and it got a bit of speculation back home. I wasn't involved in the Irish Cup that Saturday, so Derry City were about to sign me, and I was going to go and sign with Stephen Kenny at Derry City. But this phone call came one Friday, and I was at my work, and was an agent, and he said, listen, Hibs have received some footage of you and want to fly you in. And I actually thought someone was taking the mick. I want to fly you in on Sunday and want you in for a week's trial. So went home and said to my mum, somebody's wrong today from this agent. I asked him over. She says, will you ring them back? So I rang them back, and sure enough, the email comes through for the flights, and I'll never forget it. I packed my bags on the Saturday, flew out on the Sunday night, and Mark Venus lifted me at Edinburgh Airport and went in for a week's trial at Hibs, and never forget it. Trained all week, done really well. We had no training ground at the time, so you were kind of going from the ground, and they were taking you to different locations. But I remember there was one game, and it was the bounce game. And Dean Shields played me at the time, and Dean probably kept me right, and Dean says, this is probably what this game's for the day, to take a look at you. So the one thing I was blessed with, listen, again, I had a lot to learn when I moved across, but I had pace that I was born with, and I remember getting David Murphy squared up, and I didn't know David at the time. What an unbelievable left back, what an unbelievable player. But I just remember whoever I was up against, if I knocked the ball by him, if I get clear space, I was gone. And I remember running by David Murphy, and I remember the rest of the boys laughing. And I think that's what probably sealed my move. And I remember Tony Mowbray coming over, and he says, we'll get a chat with you next week. And I got a call from the representative that looked after me the rest of my life, my agent, and he said to me then, he said, listen, Ivan, he says, Hibs want to take you over. And it was a gamble. It wasn't a big contract. It was one of those ones you go over and see and work hard. And I remember having my bags packed for the next week and over and in, and was so grateful of an opportunity to play and represent a great club for Hibs. And as I said, that's how it all came about. I done well that week in the trial, and so now the rest is history.
Yeah, £5,000, Craig, the best deal in Hibs history.
Well, do you know what? I don't think we'll have spent much less and got much better. Like I said, Ivan, that's like my Rain Man period for Hibs. So I remember you coming in with your spiky hair, number 34 on your back. Big Conte was number 35 as well. He's kind of came at the same time. How big a jump was it actually going from part-time football? You've went part-time, you're grafting every day, and then you're going and training with guys like Scott Brown, Kevin Thompson, Derek Riordan, Gary O'Connor. How big a jump was that, and did you take quite a while to adjust to it?
It took me a while, and that was the thing. Physically, my body wasn't ready for it, but the thing about it is Tony Mowbray was well aware of where I needed to go and how I needed to get there. And that first year that I think we qualified for Europe, then I think Amadou and myself, I think I cut it back for him at Motherwell. I think that was that was the. So, you know, as a manager and a coach, for them to sign me for £5,000 and get those couple of performances out of us, you know, I was frustrated because at the start you're naive. You think you should be on the squad. You think you should be there. Like, I played in the reserves a lot when I first came over, but that was me learning my trade, and that was me. You know, there was a lot of rough edges. There was a lot of things I needed to learn, and you were almost getting re-educated as a footballer again, and how they played. And you're absolutely right. Kevin Thompson, Scott Brown, Ian Murray, Derek Reardon, Kevin Thompson, they were all there. Gary O'Connor, Derek Reardon, so Stephen Fletcher's youngsters. This was a serious squad I was getting into, and this was a serious squad I was going to have to dislodge good players in. So it took me time. I remember always sleeping at the start, going home after training and just sleeping because I was knackered. But I had the hunger and the fight and the belief, and you know when you're in amongst it and you're training, you know, well, you belong there, you know. And I always felt I belonged there. I always did. But Tony Mowbray was a fantastic manager for me, and he worked with me, and he never made me feel too far away from the squad. You know, he always kept me, and I think that's the secret to good managers, that they can keep people on the fringes interested. But you're just totally right about that golden era. I look at Hibs and the way things are going at the minute, and you know, there's no better time to be a Hibs fan at the minute, and I'm so excited about it. And I'm sure you boys are loving what's going on. But it kind of remembers me back to that period, to, you know, the excitement, the buzz about the place, the excitement of real good players and where the potential was going to go and stuff. So no, listen, it was a big challenge at me for that time, physically and almost mentally as well. You know, to even start recognising the attention of media. For, I know it's grew now with social media, etc. But even with the press and, you know, the attention, when you walk down the street, you know, I remember we scored your first goal for Hibs. It was, I think, Parkhead away, and all of a sudden it changed from when you walked up the town and people are stopping. You never got that back home. Mm-hmm. So then you were learning then that this is quite big. You're living in a big city of Edinburgh, and people recognise you. You go to the shops, they recognise you. Whereas back home, that didn't register. So not just about playing football, there was loads of things that you had to adapt to. But I would like to think I dealt with them well, and I would like to think I was always respectful of people and humble enough. And I think that was probably one of the things that endeared me to the Hibs fans.
No, it did. I think if there's one thing that Hibs fans like, it's a winger who gets at his defenders. And like you said, that was your hallmark, just facing them up, screwing them up, booting it, and just absolutely tearing them up. And like you said, your first goal away, no many better places to do it. If we are to believe your childhood allegiances, at Celtic Park, obviously, we kind of had our own part to play in that helicopter Sunday with that 3-1 win. How big was that goal for you in terms of your confidence? You know, you've just mentioned Tony kept you in and around the squad. You know, how being able to go and score a goal on that stage in such an important time for us as well. We were going for third. How did that sort of help you settle in further and like get your confidence growing even more?
Well, when you go to Parkhead and it's a massive place, and as I said, you know, at that time, you know, my first goal in a Hibs shirt, and I think my first touch I knocked it straight out. And you know, it's one of those just pure nerves. And the next one then was probably open space, and I think it was Varga, maybe the size of him, and I just remember getting in and blasting it through. And I can always remember there's a great picture of a steward at Parkhead, and he's holding his back, and we went to the corner at the Hibs, and that probably gives you that wee bit inner belief that, no, I belong here, I can do this. And you're right, you know, even at that time, I think the Hibs fans, you know, when you used to come on, you knew that there was a sense of anticipation, and Tony Mowbray never put the shackles on me, you know, whenever he used me at that time, because as a player you grow. So you have to understand that you're starting off what your strengths are, and I always knew what my strengths were. But I think the Hibs players, the likes of Kevin Thompson, Scott Brown, Gain Boozlin, they knew when I come on the park that they had an outlet, and they had something to use. So, you know, when I coached in the championship, and that's one of the things that I've always said now when I become a manager, know other players' strengths, because they'll make your job easier. And I'm sure for midfielders that would always say to me that, I know I used to play with Stephen Glass and all them great passers of balls, Kevin Thompson. They would even Boozy, when they opened their body up, it was get it out to me. And then, as I said, there was runners in the box when I used to get down. I even remember, like, balls out to me and me getting it back. And I remember Boosie's goal. I think Hearts were unbeaten one year and I cut it back and he flicks it behind his leg. But they were all things that we worked on. They were all things that players get to learn each other. And as I said, as a player, all you want to do when you're finished at my age now is leave memories for people like yourself. Leave memories for fans that they can turn around and say, you excited us. You know, it was I was unpredictable at times. I know that. But, you know, I used to always, it was Tom McCourt was the old Hibs kit man and Joyce McCourt and Rod Petrie that we've mentioned previous to the show. These people let me know who Hibs were. They let me know about Frank Sosie. They let me know about Mickey Weir. You know, they used to talk about Mickey Weir all the time. And, you know, I was so grateful a couple of years ago I got to meet Mickey, sat and, you know, one of the events that we had. And so for me, I wanted to entertain like those boys before me. You know, Russell Larrabee, you knew the one thing about a player, I think you should ingrain yourself in the club. You should understand the people that went before and you should aspire to be like them. You should aspire to leave your legacy. You know, and that was always what my aim in a Hibs shirt was. When I leave and when I'm finished, that I can leave memories for people that they can turn around and say, well, I was there and I enjoyed that part of it. So when people ask me what the biggest part of my career was, and, you know, this room that I'm sitting in here now, it's got all my shirts around the wall, all my Northern Ireland caps, you know, there's many memories, boots, the hat-trick ball, everything sitting there in Northern Ireland, my first cap. But you have to leave memories for people, whether they're good and whether they're bad. Sometimes, like you said, people it can't always be good, and that's football. There'll be tough moments, but make sure you give everything and entertain. And I would like to think in a Hibs shirt that when people look back on me, that, as I said, wholehearted and in my prime, could entertain as well as anyone.
I think the legacy that you leave behind, Ivan, you know, when you were kind of maybe in that second and third season at Hibs, you know, the season that we won the cup, and in the season prior, the memory for me, I was maybe about 9 or 10, and I was properly starting to get into watching the Hibs when I was going. And the one thing that I can never get out of my mind is when you went down that right wing in the first half, and everyone would stand up, and you could hear the seats all flipping up. Mm-hmm. And Aye. We've never had a player since that's made the crowd do that. And I always remember that, and I always say to my dad, I was like you don't have an Ivan Sproule now who gets you so excited running down the right wing or the left wing, to be fair. And it's, I think we were so lucky to have a player like yourself who was just so direct and just wanted to get at people and get at people and get at people. And like you said, it didn't always come off, but 9 times out of 10 it usually did.
There was that. It's funny, the memories, I always remember when I went to the games with my granddad everywhere. Like, I even remember shaking your hand in Latvia when we played over there in the Intertotal Cup. And for me, like you said about leaving memories, like obviously your most famous memory, maybe throughout your career, was what happened at Ibrox, and that kind of holds significant meaning for me because I lost my granddad about 7-8 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
After you score your second goal, and you just kind of turn and you're walking towards the corner, the camera pans out and there's a 14-year-old me. I think I was 14, 15, and my granddad at the game, and it's the only footage I'll ever have of that, and it's something for me that I can always go and look back on. You know, it might not necessarily have been you, it could have been anybody, but you yourself have made that moment for me personally. And you never even meant to do it, you just hammered it in to put us 2-0 up. But that just goes to show you how magic football can actually be, that you can create something like that from something that's all you're doing is scoring a goal.
That's it. And listen, really, I'm really honoured and privileged, you know, to play some small part in that, because I know how much family mean to people, and you know, you chat about generations and things get passed down to you in football. You know, your father, your grandfather, and those memories. And as I said, we had some fantastic memories in a Hibs shirt. And you know, whatever day my days are up, and I'm sure whatever day they sit and talk about me, you know, Hibernian will definitely be mentioned, and you know, and me, hopefully have a few years left in me yet. But it becomes such a big part of your life, and again, like you said about football, life is tough, and I think when people walk to football on a Saturday, this is where I relate to it, and this is just my own thoughts. You work all week and it's tough. You go there with your dad, you go with your granddad, you go with your mates. It's a release. These players you look at, we don't probably realise at the time, but people idolise you. People want you to lift them at the weekend. They want you to give them memories. You want to sit back, and the amount of people. And I go to Edinburgh now, and again, I go back all the time, and you'll meet someone different every time. You meet a different Hibs fan every time, and you say, because my mate and me was here and we had the best day, and for me that's priceless for me as a person, that I done that and I left memories for people. And as I said, you mentioned the hat-trick at Ibrox, and that's something I was a week away from walking out in football because I was having a tough time, and it just was as a flip of a week, and I can remember just standing putting the third one in. I remember knocking Rickson of the ball and going down and knocking the third one in, and I walked off, and I remember walking up to Tony Mowbray, and what he says to me at that moment was, your life will never be the same. That was the words he says to me coming off the pitch. And what he says to me at that day is absolutely right, because obviously I went on to play for my country. I got my move to Bristol City. I've had so many memories. I'm sitting chatting to you now tonight, and there's been 100 and 1,001 other things that have came out of this that football have gave me. But I like to think that I give it back to people like that. The thing you told me about your grandfather, that means the world to me. And there's been 101 other people and Hibs fans, and even recently I've become really good friends with Billy Lowe and Black Ivy, and I didn't realise at the time, Billy, we stay at his hotel when he goes over and looks after us, like, unbelievable. But Billy was sharing with me, that we have conversations, he said, about the time we won the cup, and he was in the Easter Road Stadium. And it's the way that he spoke about that night, him and his wife being there, and I've become really, really good friends with him now. And the amount of people throughout Hibs that I have stayed real good contacts with, and you've realised that you've done something for them in their lives, and there's memories that they hold so dear. And no matter about winning a medal, like I won the CIS Cup, I got to lead the Scottish Cup final, and unfortunately it's up there in the wall. It's a dark memory for me, but it's one that I have to put up there because I was one medal away from doing it, and when I was a Hibs player, I wanted the League Cup winners medal. I wanted the Scottish Cup because I knew what it meant to the Hibs fans. So listen, it was a runners-up medal, and it'll be a tarnished one. Runners-up medals mean nothing, but I was trying to do that. I was trying to win that medal for them people. Not just so much me, but when you're going and doing that and winning cups, you're creating great memories. They don't maybe have the medal, but they've got the memories. And that is something as a footballer you've got to remember. They may not have the medal, but they've definitely got the memories.
And you were talking there just about Tony Mowbray saying that your life would never be the same. It's maybe a little bit nicer than what Gary O'Connor said to you when you got subbed on. Big Gaz was my roommate for a long number of years. So I knew Big Gaz. But at that time, as I said, Gaz would have told us at the start of every year he was going to score 50 goals. He was moving to Man United or Arsenal. Is that true? I've heard that he kept saying Man United and Liverpool are watching me today.
But listen, what do I tell you? Big Gaz is, in my tenure, you mentioned Derek Reardon, you mentioned Gary O'Connor. They're two that pop out to me because they were in my era. Gaz says when I come on, and that's just a big Gaz comment, but as I said, there was only one way of shutting him up, and that was not even scoring one but scoring three. So I think the egg ended up in his face. But listen, big Gaz is as harmless as they come. A fantastic footballer, and also a very good human being. A real kind, good lad that never hurt a fly, and someone that again that. So many stories. I can't share them all on here right now, but a cracking lad. And listen, football, like your fans and your mates, you go to the football with these boys that we play with. You get to know them. You spend a large part of your life with them. You really do. You're there every day with them. They actually you see them more than you see your family. So as I said, we're so grateful to play with people like Gary, and I'm sure somewhere deep inside, I'm sure that's always brung up to him what he says to me that day, but I'm sure Gaz will always say, if they'd have kept me on, I'd have scored 4.
There's that famous photo of you as well when I can't remember if it's your first, it might be your first, when Boozy lifts you up and somebody's taking it for the corner flag, and it's just like you like that with your arms in the air.
I think that's it over there.
That's the one.
That's the one.
Oh, it's brilliant. That season was special as anything for me, because not only did obviously later on I got that memory with my granddad, but the following, I know we'll get onto it later, but the following cup game, we were on our way through, and he said, if Hibs win the day, I'll buy you any pair of football boots you want. So lo and behold, after the game we went to Greaves and I got a pair of like 150 quid Vapors. I was absolutely buzzing.
You're buzzing.
I was more buzzing about that than I was the win. It was unbelievable.
It was exactly 3 months after the first 3-0, and then we scooshed them again 3-0 again. Incredible.
I think that was that was probably one of my favourite games in the Hibs shirt.
Yeah.
I started that day up front along with Big Gas, so that day couldn't fall out with me.
I suppose he got a goal as well, didn't he?
He did. I crossed it in as well on the left foot.
Was there not the whole thing about Riordan maybe going to going to Cardiff or somewhere, and Tony Mowbray left him out because of it?
Tony left him out, and he started me up front, and as I said, I remember crossing in. I went in a jinky run out the left, and I got it on my left foot and I hung it up at the back post, and Gaz comes and heads it in. And then Gaz wins the flick on for me, and I went through, and Hibs had the full stand at the back that day. And I remember going. I lived down Leith Walk at that time, and I remember shaving my head, clean off, and I done it down Leith at a barber's down Leith, and I remember the boys laughing at my haircut anyway, the skinhead. But my wife always says to me, my mother always says to me, that's the worst photo of you, because I'm standing with a muscle top on me that there was no muscle, and shouting at the Hibs fans. But you know, as a young boy growing up. And I think, again, that's how Hibs fans related with me, because, as I said, I wasn't a fabricator welder up till I was 23, so any one of those could have been me, you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say, I was living their dream, and I had just tore Rangers to bits again, and I'd ripped my shirt off, and, you know, you had thousands of Hibs fans going completely bonkers. If you could bottle that, that's the one thing as a footballer that There's no football in the world can say that they don't miss that. That is one thing that for me, but that's memories that even chatting about it in here now, it excites you, it gets you buzzing.
I've got goosebumps. I'm not gonna lie, but it's mad thinking about it.
I do think at that day, I think there's videos of it that just shows you the back of Ibrox going. You know, we usually always have the wee back corner, but that day we had the full back stand, and it was absolutely electric. And that day, you know, you're walking off there, and when you're chatting about when you started off your journey and you were playing with Hibs reserves and you were not in the team and you were working hard, then you realised that there was that season you belonged. You were now one of the mainstays. You were now one of the ones that was going to carry the flag for Hibs, and that's the way that was the change in mindset for me then, was right, now it's my turn, you know, now I have to step up to the plate like Scott Brown, now I have to step up to the plate like Gary O'Connor. And I love that. And then, as I said, you know, just as you as Hibs fans, some of them memories that I have as a Hibs player were phenomenal.
I think it was a switch from 34 to 17. Now you look at 17.
That's the 34 shirt there. But my boys now, my 3 youngsters, they all fight over. So 17's renowned in this house, and 17's my number. And you know, and that I think even back over here where. In my hometown, everybody associates that number with me for some reason now, and it's purely down to Hibs. It's purely down to what happened with me, and it's probably an iconic thing now. And as I said, even for me now, if I was doing the lottery or was doing everything, or what's your favourite number? But it's funny because my 3 boys, my son, I was playing with my local club there, and I was managing them, and nobody always would have wore the 17 shirt. He's 17 now. He's took it over. He's took the mantle over, and the other 2 young boys coming along as well are the same. So, no, Hibs have left their legacy in this house, and 17's a big number for us.
It's that way now that I've got a bit of a gripe at the moment with Jamie McGrath wearing 17 because he's no a winger. 17 now for me is a winger's number.
Martin Boyle.
Yeah, Boyle had it when he first came, and
Mizian
Malida the other season there had it. But now, a centre midfielder wearing 17, that doesn't sit right with me.
Listen, as I said, it's moments, and I think that you are saying, you know, you reminisce back to some of your earlier moments in the Hibs shirt, and I think sometimes, you know, you get a purple patch, and iconic numbers will stay with, with players and stuff. And again, probably for us, we probably associate that type of player with it. But no, listen, as I said, it's to me, it's just, again, being able to leave that memory for people, and when they think of Hibs shirt in 17, that I suppose my name will pop up now and again, and that's always a nice thing for me to remember.
I do think we have to say, one of our mates, Billy, so whenever we do, like, whenever we're talking or whatever, we always talk, like, who makes your Hibs 11? And it's always like, I'm now at the stage where I'm like, oh, does actually somebody like Boyle get in because of how long he's been at Hibs? And Billy will argue until the day that he dies that you make it into every single. He could have seen Turnbull's Tornadoes as well. It wouldn't matter. You would make his favourite Hibs 11. So
I must have bought Billy a pint somewhere along the line.
I don't know about that. I only drink Snakebite. You would have remembered. From going to like the highs, he's scoring the hat trick at Ibrox, and then obviously the 3 months later we go back and beat them 3-0 again. We got to the Cup semi-final that year against Hearts, who, I mean, they had their way with us, and unfortunately you got sent off. I watched it back earlier on just to kind of remind myself, and
you never touched them.
Yeah,
you never touched them.
Didn't
Diving bastard.
see him.
What was it? So we were 2-0 down at the time, and was it out of frustration? Just, I mean, they were
frustration. I think for me at that time, it was probably, we knew it was at stake. It was Hearts. I have that in my locker, and probably to this day now, there's a dark side can come over you at a period, and you can't explain why you do things, and it's one of those ones that you do crazy things sometimes, and I had a few red cards in Scotland. Let's not deny it. For me at that time, I probably went 2-0 down, and the frustration of everything got the better of me, and I think before that game, I think we lost Kevin. Someone had left the squad at that time.
Gary went to Russia. Gary went to Moscow.
Yeah, Gary went to Russia. And
I think that Riordan and Scott Brown were injured.
There was a locker, and I'm not using that. I'm not using them as an excuse or to reason why it was at that time. I think it was pure boiled over frustration, and I suppose Hearts were our derby rivals, and I suppose again it was stupid. It was petulant. You would be as well hitting someone a hard tackle as doing what I'd done. So. As all the good memories that you've got, that's probably one of the ones I look back and regret. Or I can remember going down and sitting in the changing room, but I heard another roar going up, and then the next thing I looked around and Gary Smith sitting in beside me. So I didn't feel so bad then. Smudger was beside me, so back when you started that interview, you turned around and said, "Did you ever get a rollick?" And Tony never, I wasn't even rollicked at that time because I think we knew we let ourselves down that day performance wise as well as anything else. So listen, one of those things you've got to learn from, and it was a down. It was a period that I don't want to look back on too much, but it was one of the things that if I could change some part of my career, probably some of them moments would be some of the things I would take away.
I think as a fan though, watching that, and you can see then the passion that you've got for the club and how much a derby means, because there's some players that have come and gone over the years that don't show that sort of emotion. So I think it's bittersweet in a way as a supporter, because yes, you've lost one of your more effective players, but look at what it means, and that for me, like, I think you can look past that now. I mean, it's easy to say now that we've won the cup, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. But for me, like, I watched that and I'm thinking, okay, I would have done exactly the same.
Listen, the derby, and I think Hibs need Hearts and Hearts need Hibs. Let's not get shy away from that. Listen, be honest, we don't like each other, and that's just purely down to our rivals. But there's an element of respect for each other as clubs, because Celtic need Rangers, Rangers need Celtic. It creates something special. The atmosphere in them games is electric. There's games that have been pumped, and there's games we've won, and it's not nice when you lose a derby, but it's always nice to go out and fight and give everything. And I think the Hibs fans, they want to see you giving everything. They want to see you hitting every tackle. They want to see you chasing every ball. And there's nothing better coming off when you get those derby wins. So as I said, I had a few rivalries in my time with Hearts players. There's some players that I didn't see eye to eye with, probably on the pitch and outside the pitch. I can remember there was never anything outside, but there was a few players, if you'd have met them in the street, you weren't speaking, and that was my way of dealing things. If I wasn't gonna be two-faced, I wasn't gonna not like you in the pitch and then outside the pitch then let on that I loved you, because and in a way I respect them for that, because they were fighting for their side and I was fighting for mine. And I think for any fan, I think that's the way you want it. You want your players to not be coming off laughing, and sometimes that gripes me a wee bit in football at the minute when players are their arms around with each other coming off the pitch and they're covering their mouth and they're talking. If I'm there to play football, I'm there to play football, and I'm there to fight for my side. And maybe that was just me. That was just my personality, and I was so intense and I was so engrossed in the thing when I was a player that I suppose that softer side of me never really come out in the pitch.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right though. That winds me up too. Just all this pally.
That is the worst. This is the worst. All that stuff. The hand over the mouth stuff's the worst for me. Oh, I can't abide it.
Yeah, you don't really get too much up here, but like in the Premier League and that, it's just.
No, as I said, I suppose now they have to be careful with social media. But the one thing that I suppose and I'm not saying that you have to hate each other, but I'm saying you're out there trying to work for 3 points. You're out there. You've got thousands and thousands of fans that are paying for you to give everything for your shirt. And after the game, yes, everything's forgot about. But there comes a time where you do it, and it's away from the pitch and stuff like that.
Yeah. The following season, we actually did win silverware. But early on in the season, Tony Mowbray, of course, leaves for West Brom a couple of months in, and then John Collins comes in. Apart from his managerial expertise and stuff, how many times did he show you his six-pack?
Well, now, he showed me and Scotty a few times, but listen, there'll be a lot of stories and stuff and what happened with John and when he left and all the rest. First things first, John was an unbelievable player, an unbelievable athlete, had an unbelievable career that, was second to none within some of the best Scottish players out there. I'm obviously very respectful that the fact that I got a medal under him, and that cup run that we went on, it was we had some fantastic performances. And to be fair, I played some great football under John and Tommy Craig, and he was a different kind of character. He very, very, very high standards. He was a different man manager than Tony. And sometimes when them changes happen, you're used to one thing, so change, sometimes people don't like change. But again, he was a high standard setter, and he could have come in there. There could have been a manager come in there, and we may not have won the League Cup, and we hadn't won something for so long. Remember back that that was a catalyst. That was something that Hibs were pining for. I know the Scottish Cup was the Holy Grail. But to even win that, you go on about the Skull Cup, you go on about, we knew what was at stake that day when we went to play Kilmarnock. Yep. We knew that Hibs needed this cup. And to be fair, John, a Hibs player himself, and, some great memories before, he left, before he went on. So for him to do that as well was a special thing for him. And again, I did leave the club because I went to go to play in the championship at that time. Did me and John always see eye to eye? I don't know if we did, but again, as a manager, as a professional, again, he was right up there.
Yeah, you touched there on the cup run, and one of the more entertaining games of the cup run was that quarter final against Hearts at Easter Road. Big Rob Jones with a goal. What was he like to play with? Rob
was a good leader. Again, a quiet big guy. When I say quiet big guy, went about his business. Didn't mess around. Got the stuff done. Became a natural leader. And at the time, we probably had a few good natural leaders within that squad. Big characters, and Rob was certainly one of them. He did, again, you could see he was endeared to the Hibs fans. He played with full wholehearted. He was a good leader. We followed him, you know what I mean? He wanted things, we done it. And as I said, at that period in time, he was a calming influence. He wasn't as much as a shouter and a roarer. He was more of a led by example. And again, something that I'm sure Rob will always hold dear. And we had a reunion a few years ago, and I've met him on several other occasions just through Hibs things. And a real good guy, and someone I'm sure that Hibs fans will always fondly remember as well.
Yeah. Craig, do you remember that night? I feel like we were robbed of giving him an absolute doing on the scoreline.
Do you know what, right? This is one of my worst ever things because I wasn't there.
Neither was I. I was watching it on the telly, I remember.
I was a junior snooker player and I was playing in a quarter-final that night. And it was my granddad that got me into snooker, and even he bumped me to go to Easter Road, and he told me under no circumstances was I missing that to go to Easter Road. So I wasn't even there, which is sickening because that was a period where I went, I think in the 2000s up until about 2008, 2009, I could probably count the amount of games I missed on one hand.
Yeah.
And that was one of them, which is absolutely sickening.
It could have been anything that night. Honestly, it could have been a cricket score. I remember it.
No, as I said, the team...
81%. Was it 81% possession or something? I had.
Yeah, we were strong. Yeah, we were strong at that time, and as I said, we had a confidence about us at that time. We were fit. John did have us. I can remember Arthur's Seat. When I fly into Edinburgh, I look at Arthur's Seat and thinking I've run around there a few times. And that was probably one of the funnest periods in my career. A lot of things. I got me moved to Bristol City out of it. At that time, probably when I look back at my career, I went through a real purple patch at that time, and subconsciously John was probably a part to play in that as well because he had such high standards.
And then you're moving on to the final. I mean, you look at it as a whole, and it's a complete no punches pulled final. Get in there, get the job done, get out with a medal. That was the first final that I had experienced as a Hibs fan. And I remember saying to my dad, "This is brilliant. We're going to win cups all the time now." But we were excellent that day, and I think it could have been easy to shrink in the occasion and maybe let the occasion get the better of you. But from start to finish, we were absolutely excellent that day.
No, absolutely. I can remember John Collins come around and give us all individual DVDs the night before, and it was we montages of our clips up to the final and other stuff that we had done, and driving into Hampden, when you do that drive in, I can remember seeing the thousands of Hibs fans driving into Hampden that day, and just there was a confidence about us. You looked around left to right in the bus. Scott was there, Stephen Fletcher was there, I was there, Benji was there, Zamama was there, Rob was there, David Murphy, Stephen Whittaker. These were boys that these were serious players. Now don't get me wrong, Kilmarnock had good players at that time as well, but these boys were serious players. We knew what we could do, we knew what damage we could do, and we did it that day. And my memories of that day was obviously the snow and stuff, and flying over a lot of my family, and I think I nearly had a full bus went through from Edinburgh to Glasgow that day. But you look back now, and the Sunshine and Leith has got so iconic, right through, this last while, just for the European nights and the way the things are going for the team at the minute, the picture where they've all the boys' arms. But that when we won the cup that day, I remember Sunshine and Leith, and I remember standing on my own, and I'm not going to lie, I stood and cried in the pitch because you had won something for all these people. And I can remember throwing my boots under the crowd. I think I come up, my socks and my shirt was the only thing I was left with. But I remember sitting thinking, this is what it means, this is what it is. And I remember getting my medal. I remember going up the steps, and Sunshine and Leith. That was the day that you realised that Sunshine and Leith, what it was. That was, and I go back to the start of our interview, the family part. You have now become part of their family. You are now part of that. You will share something with them Hibs fans for the rest of your life, because that can never be took away from me. Like the boys that have went on to win the Scottish Cup, I lost it. They won it. We won the League Cup final. The boys that won the Skull Cup final. When you win something, you've done something. You've delivered, as well as delivering the big days, the hat tricks, the derby ones or whatever. But they walk up the steps and lift something, and everybody will always remember where they were that day or what they were doing. And that night, I just can't remember just as well. But unbelievable day. And
that's a shame, because that was my next question, was how good was the party afterwards?
Unbelievable. I can remember sitting in the bus beside Boozy driving through, and then I had a wee flat down Leith at that time, so I lived in the heart of it. You know, me and my wife lived we bought a wee townhouse flat, and I can remember driving down in the bus and the thousands of people down Leith and arriving at the stadium, and you know, it just the party that we had in the ground that night, and we danced, and you back Rod Petrie was there, and you know, everybody was there with their families, and it was just a real feel good factor. And you know, my family speak about it to this day, and just unbelievable memories. And we were just out onto the pitch and stuff. And listen, again, there's so many memories you could speak about, but the end of the night become a bit blurry. But as I said, I think that was well deserved.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. What a day that was, and like I said, I was like, this football thing's fucking piss easy. We'll just go up and we'll win the cup again next year.
It just shows you though. Like I remember when the fourth one went in. I turned to my granddad and I was like, "Finally!" And he was like, "No, not yet. I've been here too many times. Been here far too many times."
Did you feel that on the pitch? Was there a moment where you thought, "Yeah, it's done"?
Yeah, we were breaking. We did every time we broke. It looked, you know, it didn't. The breaks that we had that day didn't look like. You know, when we broke with pace. You know, you had Benji coming on off the bench. You had Zabama come on for me. You had Fletch. You had people that you knew at that. Handham was a big pitch, and I think we outran them that day. You know, we Lewis came of age that day in the pitch, and we had so much energy with Stephen Whittaker and Murph at fullbacks, and you know Chris Hogg and Rob Jones and McNeil. We knew. I just had a sense that that was the day, and we delivered. And as I said, everything worked out, and. Sometimes it clicks like that at Hampden, and sometimes it doesn't, as I've learnt as well. But absolutely delighted to get that one over the line. And as I said, it's something that'll the memories of that'll always stay fondly with me.
Benji and Zamama, Craig, a couple of decent players there.
They were good, mate. They were good. As I was saying about the semi-final before. That was when Benji kind of got thrown in because I'm pretty sure Stephen Whittaker ended up playing centre mid that day because we were just absolutely decimated. But no, they're in the same sort of profile as you, Ivan. Like Liam says, those moments where it doesn't happen so much these days because everybody stands at the football. But back when you got the ball on the left, it was always on the terrace. I always remember it on the terrace.
The old stand, the
old stand getting there, and as soon as it was a touch with the outside of your right foot, and then bang, you were away, and then all of a sudden it was just the clang of the seats going up. Benji and Zamama were the same.
Yeah,
they're the. Like you,
Mavericks.
Guys like you, guys like you, Benji, Zamama, even, more recent guys like Malida when he was here, Eli Yuan when he's on form, Martin Boyle. Those are the guys you pay your, I pay my season ticket every season to go and watch guys like them.
I
didn't go and watch, I didn't want to see Rocky Bashiri passing the ball to Jordan Smith 10 times a game. I want to see up the park, and that's why I think you especially, take away the Rangers stuff because that's just luckily for you, that's a moment that you created that you'll share with us and generations after me forever. But that's why I think you're so held in high esteem because you're one of the ones who just got us off our seats. We're not like the Gorgie cardigan wearers who like the long ball, hoof ball, battering foot. We want to. We're the great entertainers for a reason, and that's why I think you have such a connection with the support because you got us off our seats. You excited us. There was, like you said, half the time there was some things you didn't even know what you were going to do, and that's what made it just as entertaining.
As I said, it's.
No, carry on, Evan. Sorry.
It is just exactly what you said there. You pay to entertain. Now, don't get me wrong, football has changed and systems have changed, and it was more 4-3-3, I suppose, over then and back then, and it was one of those things that I remember the old stand, and I remember when at the start of my career, whenever Tony would have said to me to get warmed up, and you'd have heard the crowd before I'd have come on, and that was a buzz to me because I knew what they were expecting when I come on. And sometimes now you speak to you speak to the old fullbacks that you played against, whatever, and I don't know if I can curse on this or not, but
No, you can't.
they
Crack
turn
on.
around and say, for fuck's sake, they were the last thing I wanted to see. Whenever something, maybe 75 minutes or whatever it was, but listen, the fans can make players play as well. When they do get behind you, it gives you an extra few steps. And as I said to me, you're right. You hear the clatter of those seats, and the roar, and you look into fans' eyes, you look into the passion that they give you. You would go through a brick wall. There are literally times, like there was one of those ones at Easter Road. I think there was a game against Celtic, and I was squaring up to Paul Telfer, but I actually was trying to have a go at Bobo Baldy. So that's how much people chat. I listened to an interview about, you listen to Neil Lennon and some of the boys were doing interviews at a podcast and were saying about how the big physical sides Celtic had at one time. I was squaring these boys up at Easter Road because I felt invincible. So where I grew that other 2 or 3 foot out, I don't know. But I had absolutely zero fear, zero respect. I don't mean zero respect. Fear was more of it. I would have faced anything in a Hibs shirt at that period of time because I felt that I had the thousands of fans at me backing. I felt I had a teammate at me backing, and I just felt as if that at that time for Hibs, that no matter who come in through that gate, we were going to face them.
I was scared of Bobo Baldy, and I was sat in the fucking stand.
Aye, same.
You know what I mean? And then the time comes, you leave Hibs, you go to Bristol City. Was it always Bristol City, or was there other clubs that were looking at you?
No, as I said, at that time, it came around, Bristol, we had knew coming up to the end of that season, and this is how football works, and there's no use lying about it. We knew there was a bid going to come in, and my agent had told me that, listen, deal-wise, it was probably a lot financially for me. It was late into the game, and, I wasn't going to lie about it. You do have to sit and think to yourself in the bigger picture, financially, unless I move to Celtic or Rangers, the next thing is to move to the Championship in England. And I had a decision to make. I loved Hibs. I was fondly thought of with a good side, but for me and my wife, and I suppose at that time, Sam was coming along and trying to make as much money out of football as we possibly could, and I took the decision out of that, and Hibs Bristol City made a real good offer, and I went down to look around Bristol, and I liked what I'd seen, and I liked the project that they had sold me, and the move was done. I spoke to Rod Petrie, and Rod fully understood where my background was. I was late into the game, and I had give Hibs some fantastic, memories, although I think Rod was trying to sell me to Dnipro one time, and he probably wasn't that happy, and I never took that move because Dnipro did officially put a bid in for me at one time, and that was, that would have been probably from signing for £5,000. I'm sure it was a lot more at that time, although there was a figure through around what Dnipro were going to pay out or what they were going to give, because I do remember Tony Mowbray pulling me in and telling me after the UEFA Cup games that, Dnipro were seriously interested in me, and would I be interested in that. I had born off settling in Edinburgh, never mind going to Ukraine. So, Crocodile Dundee would have been the way I described me. So, I knew that moving to England was something that I wanted to do. And for my international career, that was really up and going at the time. And Laurie Sanchez advised me as well, rightly or wrongly, listen, even England's a good thing to go and crack. Why don't you try and see if you can get to the Premier League in England? Why, pace is the big thing down there. You've built for it. So, we went and tried it, and listen, first year got to the playoff final, 1 game away. Hull beat us at Wembley. So the dream of going down and signing a 3-year deal, and it could have been the next 2 years in the Premier League, was 90 minutes away. So they have those experiences as well, were fantastic, and I ended up signing a year extension at Bristol. Mm-hmm. Again, a bit like Hibs, maybe not as much so, but really endeared with the fans, and some great memories down there, great goals against Southampton and Leicester, and some fantastic memories that I've got, and just lucky, I don't know, always blessed to have a connection with fan bases, and was glad that I'd done that, because sometimes it's nice to see different things. Hibs 110% will always be, if you ask me what's your club, and that's not disrespecting Linfield where I played, or Roma Town, or Bristol City, but Hibs are my club through and through, without, now everybody knows that. But I was glad to have those experiences down in England and play in the FA Cup, play in the Carling Cup, play against Leeds, play against Newcastle. Do that. that can never be took away from me.
Exactly.
Some of the goals at the iPower Stadium against, I think, remember the goal at Leicester, and I took it from the halfway line, and goals against Southampton. I've done that, and for me now to look back with my boys and show them that as well. It wasn't all Bristol, it wasn't all Hibs. It was moments in England, but part of me always lay. It was always unfinished business, and that's probably the reason why I ended up coming back up the road again.
Absolutely. And you touched there on the playoff final. Was that the one where Dean Windass scored that absolute raker?
Dean scored the volley. I don't think he'll ever had a volley like that again in his life. It fell at the edge of the box, and he just smacked this thing. And I always can remember in the last couple of minutes, I got to the byline again. If you watch that playoff final back, and I'll go by the fullback, and I cut one back for Darren Byfield, who at that time was our top goal scorer, and I think it misses Darren Byfield's foot by inches. But that's the difference of winning and losing. It was down to inches that day. And listen, Hull went on, they won it. They went on to have their story. Bristol City, we didn't. We lost it. And in the final and in big games, you've got to turn up. And unfortunately for us today, that day in the final, we just came short.
I was interested when I was writing my notes up is how as a footballer do you then pick yourself up to go again the next season? How difficult is it to kind of bypass that feeling of disappointment that you missed out? You were so close to the Premier League, and you've got to go through that whole season again to get the chance.
The Championship's relentless. England is relentless. There's no doubting. It's a big league. It's a physical league. It's you just asked me when I first went to the Irish League to the SPL. Back then, I had to do the exact same thing again when I went down to England, because I felt as if the boys were bigger and stronger again down there at that moment in time. So for me, we'd won the elation of winning it with Hibs, having another big strong season and getting to the playoff final. But you're absolutely right. Again, anybody that didn't cry that day at Wembley when you lose something as big and hurt, you have to hurt. You have to be hungry. We did. We rebuilt. We went and we bought new players that next year. Bristol City actually went and tried to go down the route of spending money to try and challenge, and it didn't quite work. Then it put a bit more pressure on the manager, the players, and everybody, because a team that just got promoted from League One into the Championship and then straight away got to the playoff final. The expectation probably should have been solid in the Championship, but they signed me, they signed Lee Trundle, they signed a few players that worked, and they had a hungry squad that won League One. So I think, like everybody, you expect, like you said about winning the League Cup final with Hibs, this is going to be like this all the time. It just wasn't like that as well, because the Championship's relentless and there's so much money comes running around it, and the next year was difficult, and again some good memories again, but it was one of those ones that, as a footballer, you're always blessed with challenges, and that's why winning's a small percent. You hear all the great players and all, but whether you're any part of sport or any part of anything, the good times are this, and the working hard and the hard times are unfortunately a lot more. Yeah.
And then when the call comes from Hibs, is it a no-brainer to come back up the road?
It was. Listen, I looked for it. I don't think, my agent says there was a few clubs, like, again, in England that were willing to talk to me, but I didn't want to listen. I was tunnel vision. So there could have been a better deal out there for me at that time, but my wife, we had the boys then, Alfie and Sam, and I felt comfortable in Edinburgh. I felt comfortable with the people, and listen, I know it says that I wanted to move for the money to get down to England for the Championship and move for that experience, and that was for my reason, and there's no hiding behind that at that time. But my move to come back, the reason wasn't to do with money then, or the reason was I got back to somewhere that I loved, and it was back to somewhere that I felt safe, and I wanted to try and win that Scottish Cup. I felt there was unfinished business for me at the club, and that was the reason why I took it. And as I said, more than delighted, and pulling the shirt on you once for Hibs is an honour, but to do it over 100 times is as I said, that was something that always stayed with me.
No, absolutely, and I feel like that season we did struggle. I think we brought in quite a lot of players on loan as well, and it just didn't really quite click for us this season. We miraculously managed to get to the cup final, but there was times during the league season, there was one game in particular that I remember. It was away against Dunfermline, and I think we beat them 3-2. and Gary O'Connor scored and he whipped his top off and he had a handwritten.
Only God can judge me. I meant that.
And I remember
I'm
that.
sure that was there not like a big story that it broke about him in the press? Like,
Aye.
was about his like dealings at Birmingham. And
Gaz always had the baggage with him, but again, the biggest heart in football, and again, a real good lad. And as I said, that's how Gaz answers you, puts the ball in the net.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I remember that night and thinking, we're safe, we'll be fine. And then, you know, we get to the Scottish Cup final after a really good performance against Aberdeen in the semi. You know, wee Sparky gets the goal. But was it extra time? Did we have to go to extra time that day, Craig? I
think it was like
we won it normal time that day against Aberdeen.
Yeah,
81st. I'm sure it was Scott Vernon maybe scored an absolute.
Oh yeah. It was about 40 yards out,
and then because O'Connor had scored at like the near post.
Quite
early. It was only like
2
4 or 5 minutes
something.
in. It was like really early on he'd scored.
Yeah.
But that was quite a. That was probably like you. I think Ivan, you probably came back in the slap bang of that. Like really, like it was almost like a horrible period. Like you know, we'd had the high, obviously the CIS Cup win, and then there was just kind of like a succession of you know, with Mixu came in, didn't quite work out. Colin Calderwood came in, didn't quite work out. I'm pretty sure I'm missing someone in there as well.
Pat Fenlon, come in, man.
And then Fenlon. Yeah, John Hughes as well. I know we finished third that season, but we completely capitulated after January. How different was it the second time? As you know, you come in the first time, there's this energetic, young, hungry dressing room. All these players that went on to sell for big money internationalists. You know yourself, you became an internationalist. You've then come back as a seasoned, experienced player, having had the experience in the Championship. How different was it coming back that second time round?
Just when you mention that, that's one of the things you always remember games. And that Dunfermline game, I think I ended up being captain that day at Dunfermline. I wasn't captain material, but again, probably the experience that I had, the amount of games that I'd played, and I remember it was different because you're fighting for your life then, and I was never used to fighting for my life. You know, we were always at the top, but Colin Calderwood come in, he signed me, but it just didn't. It didn't work. He tried hard. He was a good manager. Listen, he's had a fantastic. He's went down now, and he's had a great career. But for whatever reason, it didn't work. Signings will make or break you, and some didn't deliver, and there was a lot of change, and it was a struggle period. Yes, it was totally different from the first 10-year round, but it was change, and it was something that you were always you could never think that. From the first period that I had, that we were going to struggle like that, but that's what I'm telling you. Football will throw challenges, but all you can do is roll your sleeves up and fight. And at that period in time, it wasn't the most comfortable time to play for Hibs, but for me, it was one of those things that you just had to, as I said, do your very, very best, and hopefully you come out it. And at that period in time, yes, it was rocky.
Yeah, I mean, and it all kind of culminated, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but it culminated in that Scottish Cup final against Hearts. Obviously, we took a bit of a doing that day. What was the mood like going up to the game? Were you in confident mood? Was it different to the build up to the League Cup final in 2007?
I think it was. I think the final. I remember not. I played every round up to the final, and I'm not gonna not tell the truth about it. So I was absolutely devastated not to start in the final. Mm-hmm. I think that's when me and Pat Fenlon's relationship ended. I think that was the end of me, because I think in big games you play big players.
Yep.
And I think listen, don't get me wrong, I played in a semi-final where I got sent off, and we spoke about it earlier in the interview, and done something stupid. But I think I was mature that day, and I think Ian Murray was put in the bench for Pabajabi, and I was on the bench as well. And I felt as if playing every round up to that, I think I knew then that when you don't play in those big games and you're not picked, that it kind of tells you where that manager sees you at that moment in time. And that had no affection on me when I came on and tried. Listen, we were a few goals down when he made the substitution, but I just felt as if we were just dropping and changing too many players, and it was a kind of I'm not saying it was a through together side, but we went in that run. And don't get me wrong, you can get good performance, but I think it was more individual performance. It wasn't the team, so it was more individuals that was getting us through. And for me, it wasn't the same in that final. It was a horrible day, an absolute nightmare. I wanted to win that cup so much because I wanted to win the League Cup as much as I wanted to win it for the Hibs fans. I wanted to win that for myself. I wanted a Scottish Cup medal, winners medal. I wanted a League Cup winners medal. I wanted the both. I was being selfish at that time, and I knew I wasn't going to get it. And I knew I definitely wasn't going to get it. Sitting on the bench. And I think I would have had a bigger part to play. Listen, if Ivan Sproule would have played in that final, that game, or we had won the game, as I said, I'm not saying that was going to change any big scoreline, but I certainly felt as if I would have had more heart and passion on that pitch that day to start that game than I was sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, like what I was talking about earlier. I mean, I don't want to throw any players under the bus or anything, but when you bring in that many players on loan that maybe don't understand the club as much and don't understand how much it means, at that point it was 110 years without the Scottish Cup. I think then if you're leaving the players like yourself, like Ian Murray, who know it and get it on the bench, then I mean that's your first mistake, really.
I mean, you look back at the post-match interview, and I always remember seeing it. I'm sure there was a wee Irish guy that was over like interviewing, like he had a wee YouTube channel at the time when YouTube was coming big for these things, and he was interviewing players after the game, and he was interviewing Matt Doherty, and he was almost smirking after the game. We'd taken and that's probably where, like I said, you came back probably at the worst time because. Guys like you and Gary O'Connor and Lee Griffiths had obviously came in, guys who love the club, support the club, but then you're supported by guys who, like Matt Doherty, who are rightly coming in to further their own career. And it was just, that was a proper sickener at the end of that. Like, it was, he played against Andy Driver. Andy Driver hadn't kicked a ball for about a year, and he absolutely tore him to shreds. And then, guys like Kujabi, it was just, that was a horrible, horrible day. So I can't imagine... for someone who'd grown to have such affection for the club, having almost that now attached to your name felt at the time, given you would have probably been going through exactly what we were going through in the stands.
It was a dark day. Listen, I remember driving down back to Edinburgh in the bus, and rightly so, the Hearts fans celebrating, and I remember driving back to my house, and the Hearts scarves tied to the fence outside the house, and you're always going to get it, and that's part and parcel of Hibs and Hearts, but to be beat that day and be demoralised, and rightly so, I don't think enough of them knew about what they were getting into that day and how big it was, and I think that's what killed us. That's what let us down a bit. And I always go back to when you go on about sport. You need to be ready to go through a brick wall before you go out onto that. You're going out to a coliseum. You're going out to people you're going out to something that's much bigger than you. But you need to be ready for it. You need to be ready to fight. You need to be ready to roll up your sleeves. You're not going out there for an easy time, and that's one thing. And listen, it was a horrible moment in my career. It's one of those ones that it's a dark day. I'll never forget it. But here's one of those ones that I have to just move on from.
And it could be the making of you, right? I mean, as much as Matt Doherty was not a great player for Hibs, Craig, and he's probably not thought of in a very positive light by a lot of the fans. I mean, look at the career that he's went on to have, and I mean,
well, he's not, but he's well thought of by one of our other pals, Liam, because he's still trying to flog a signed programme that he got about 13 years ago.
Every time Matt Doherty's name comes up, our pal, he goes, "I've got a signed Scottish Cup semi-final programme by him. Anyone want to buy it?"
And nobody ever wants to buy it. Ever.
Nah.
And then you leave the club for a second time, Ivan. Head up north to Ross County, where you signed with Derek Adams. I want to know, is he as boring in real life as he is in the media?
I left Hibs. That was the time I left Hibs, as I said. The reason I left Hibs, and I want to be clear on that, is, like, again, I wasn't playing. I remember going to the Christmas party down to Newcastle, and I remember that Saturday the boys were heading away in the bus, and I wasn't going to go on the Christmas night out.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't, like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't there to collect money. I wasn't there just to get my money and sit in the stand and be happy, getting well paid and just sitting there. That's not why we play football. That's not the people that we are. So I was frustrated that I wasn't playing. Me and Pat had lost respect for each other, as he had lost respect for me as a player. I lost respect for him as a manager. Whether he says that or not, I felt as if that's the way the relationship went. I felt because I had so much affection and care for the club, for me to stay at the club in the changing room and be unhappy rubs off on others around you. So what I done, and I would like to think that I was thought, and people would admire me for this. I moved my wife and my kids up to Inverness to go away from the club that I loved to try and play again, because I wasn't going to play there anyway. So why stay about to be? Although I would have been a fan's favourite and people would have still loved to have seen me about, but that's not why you play football. You play to play. So I went and spoke to Rod, and Rod again did try to speak me out and try to see could this work out. Basically, could I turn this around? And I says, Rod, I knew it was broke because I knew it was broke from the Scottish Cup final. And I took that move. And listen, Derek is a different kind of character, and I don't think Derek had ever dealt with anybody like me before. Because his father, George Adams, had actually done the deal. It actually was a breath of fresh air for me at that time, because I wasn't playing and because I was so frustrated. I got a new release for life. I remember signing for him, and then we went out to Marbella for a shooting camp. And if you can rightly remember back, Ross County, we went on to win, I think, 10 games. We went on to win this mad run and ended up in the top. I think they're near bottom, and I signed him. My first game was live in Sky, and I scored 2 against St Mirren away.
One of them was a raker, I remember.
And then all of a sudden, I think 2 or 3 games, I scored in my first 3 or 4 games
against us as well.
That's what I felt that I could have given Hibs at that time, but I wasn't being allowed to do it. And then I remember, of course, the dreaded game that happened. Hibs come up to Ross County, up to Dingwall.
Yeah.
And I knew as soon as, I can't remember, I think it was Ian Vigors. And at that time, like I said at the start of the interview, these boys worked out. Richie Britton, Rocco Crunley and Vigors, they were thinking, that's just great. We just slipped the ball on behind for him and he's away.
Yeah.
So they were fantastic footballers, by the way. And I remember Ian Vigors had built up a good relationship, and he slipped me in behind, I think, Paul Hanlon and Lewis Stevenson, and I just go. And I can remember running around the goalkeeper, and I just lifted my head, and as I'm about to knock it into the net, all I see is the green and white. And if there ever is a moment where you think, oh my God. So I rolled the ball into the net. Now, part of me's looking for Pat Fenlon. But the Ross County boys come to celebrate with me, and if you watch that goal back, I do this. I stop them.
Yeah.
So I don't celebrate, because I wouldn't do that, obviously, for obvious reasons. But I walked back to the halfway line, and I just shared a look at Pat. And basically it was for Pat. That's what you could have had. Exactly. So we won the game 1-0. It's a black mark from a Hibs side from me, scoring a winner against Hibs. But as I said, one of those things. It was a club that were humble. They're a hard-working young club, and they were on their way up. And I had fond memories. And that year, I'd signed a 1.5-year contract up there, and things really did go well in a football aspect. I had goals against Celtic, and at that time, St John's, I think I ended up maybe with 7-8 goals. That half of that end of the season, it really went really well, and they wanted to sign another new extension for me. So at that time, it was a good move.
Absolutely. Great pies as well. Fantastic pies.
Great pies. Oh, listen, great pies. And listen, I remember my wee dog, he's scooting about the floor here somewhere. I got him up on Inverness Harley. We last option, I've still got him. And so wee things like that, I would be sentimental. And I can remember the Loch Ness and stuff like that. Like Scotland, my mum, some people know, my mum's actually Scottish. She was from Glasgow as a youngster, moved across to Northern Ireland, and it's one of those things for me that Scotland always plays a big part in your life, and I'm lucky enough as a footballer you get to see parts of the world, but Scotland's obviously a place that means so much to me, and Edinburgh did, and even up in the Highlands, it's a beautiful place. There's some fantastic scenery, and As I said, it's any club that I've played for, and even at Ross County, the fans again, it went really, really well. And the only black mark I've got then is I remember the League Cup final where I went to support Hibs and the Hibs end, but the Ross County men see me with my Hibs scarf. So then they were having a go at me then for not wearing half and half, but they knew that I was a Hibs man through and through. And unfortunately, then on that day, Ross County end up beating us. So it's been a career where there's been some twists and tails.
I never knew that your mum was Scottish. You never get a call from Walter Smith or Ali McCoy said
At that
too?
time, I was probably told to hang a wee bit, but listen, I was born and reared in Northern Ireland, and passionate Northern Ireland man. To play for my country, George Best was an idol. Played for Hibs, so there again was another one that linked it with it. And my first cap, we beat England 1-0, the big famous night at Windsor Park. That come the week after the hat-trick at Ibrox. So as you could say, if Roy of the Rovers read a book, I was going to write mine at that spell.
Was it who was playing in that England team that night? Was that maybe the toughest test of your career in terms of
Beckham played, Rooney played. Ashley Cole and me had a good foot race down the side. That was one of my other claims to fame. Got the ball in front of Ashley Cole's not bad.
Not as good as David Murphy,
though. It was fantastic. As I said, beating the likes of Gerrard, Beckham, Rooney. Even I come on for David Healy that night, and I remember warming up. And I'm a Spurs fan in England, and Jermaine Defoe standing beside me warming up, and you're coming on, and you're standing up against Rio Ferdinand, and you know what I mean. These are the boys that are the superstars of world football, and you've actually put them to the sword. In Windsor Park, Windsor Park would remember a wee bit of Easter Road when it rocks. It's Northern Ireland fans are passionate fans, and we were the ones that started off kind of that generational things that Northern Ireland. We were very lucky that Martin and I went on to qualify for the Euros and stuff like that, but we were the catalyst for it at that time, and we beat Spain. I played against Spain, I played against Portugal, and them's memories that'll never leave me.
That was like the period when there was like David Healy just scored with every shot he took. Did he not like?
He was the top goal scorer in the Euros, I think.
Yeah.
It was a mad stat. I think at that time we were beating teams like Spain, and we were beating England, and I can remember beating Sweden away. I can remember playing against Ibrahimovic away, and Northern Ireland at that time we didn't have big Premier League stars. A lot of our boys played in the Championship or Scotland, respectively. Good leagues, but these boys were playing for biggest clubs in the world, and this wee nation of Northern Ireland are rocking up and causing all kinds of mayhem. And as I said, some fantastic memories in that Northern Ireland setup at that time. And yes, David Healy at that time, I remember scoring his hat-trick at Ibrox, or not at Ibrox, his hat-trick at Windsor Park, and Puyol was marking him. Puyol at Barcelona, prime Puyol, and he's just doing things that we're all sitting back thinking, this is unbelievable.
Did you ever see just with the journey that you went on, Ivan? Like you said, your journey's well documented. Starting late, coming from part-time football to Hibs, and then did you ever allow yourself in those moments to almost just kind of you're playing at Ibrox, you're playing at Parkhead, you're playing at Wembley, and you're playing in the Championship final. Did you ever allow yourself any moment to just sit and think wow, where if only if you could have told 14, 15-year-old Ivan that this was going to happen, did you ever allow yourself to have those kind of moments?
Not really. I come from a real strong family. I come from a real grounded upbringing. I never get too, you can lose sight of where you're at. You can get football. I think everybody well documented. You can get carried away with yourself. You're idolized. Your fans want your autographs. You know what I mean when I say that. Sometimes you've got to keep your feet in the ground, and my family would never let me do that, and the people that I keep around me would never let me do that. Listen, it's only whenever you sit back now and do things like this and you start mentioning that moment, you mention that moment, you mention that moment. From where I came from, I think I keep saying it's a Roy of the Rovers kind of story, and I just feel lucky. I feel blessed. I feel humble. I worked really hard. I'm a grafter. I'm a fighter. I knew my limitations as a player, but I knew I had a massive heart, and I knew I had a point to prove where I was doing it for I suppose my family, and I was doing it for myself, because as I said, when I was a young boy I missed out in the Northern Ireland schoolboys, and it was always not is he the one that's going to get across, and never quite got across. And then, even again, one of my good friends and Gary O'Connor, there was always that doubt over you, where what's he going to do? Or so I was always hungry. I was always fighting. Even when I went to England, you'll not be good enough down in England, and he's not good enough to play with Northern Ireland. And when I done it all, and so I look back at it with fond memories. As I said, the room that I sit around me here now is full of Northern Ireland shirts and Hibs shirts, Bristol City shirts, my caps. There's the there's the League Cup winners medal. That's I think that's the Hibs. That's the one. I think we're away there at. I can't remember. I think that's Dundee United maybe. So there's loads of great memories. There's Barry Ferguson's shirt, Scott Brown's. That's the Spain game. That was a game against Celtic away. And I think if you see here, I read this in this game here. It says, as a boy growing up, I always had a dream to become a professional footballer. To me, this was the day it came true. But dreams just don't happen. I always believed I would make it happen every second, minute, hour. I gave my all, nothing less. And now when the crowds are gone and the finals are played, I can say this, I sure did. All for my wife, kids, family, friends, and many more.
That's amazing, man. Honestly,
that's things to me that, I have this room now, and my boys come and play pool with their friends, and and they look at it. And even the Ross County shirts up over there, because they played a part in it. And what my biggest legacy will be is that I made people like you hopefully happy. I made other people happy. Sometimes on a Saturday night in the Volley Arms down Leith, I made the karaoke's happy. And I loved it. I loved it to the full. And I'm very, very, very blessed, very, very humbled. And even now when I come back over to stay with Billy at Black Ivy and go and watch Hibs and take my kids there, and it's special. It's something special.
Amazing. Well, Ivan, we always like to finish our episodes with some listener questions.
Now it's time to answer the Hibs Ramble listener questions.
Our listener John, he asks us every week what we're having for dinner. So if you've had your dinner, what did you have? And if you've not had it yet, what are you having?
Well, actually, my mother-in-law, she's one of the best. She took me for my dinner today, so I had lasagna today. So I had lasagna and salad today, so that's what I had today.
We love lasagna. What are you having, Craig?
I've not decided yet, mate. I was on parenting duties until we started this. So the Chippy might be getting a wee phone call.
Get the call tonight.
I think so. Friday night. Why not?
Why
My
not?
lovely wife has made me a spag ball.
Oh, lovely.
I'm absolutely buzzing for it. Next up, Dean asks, could you name one Hibs player, past or present, that you wish you'd played with during your time at Hibs?
You go through them, but I think everybody. I think you go on about Frank Soze, you go on about Russell Ladape. There's been some, George Best, but I think the one that stands out for me, and I've met him, and I've seen clips of him, and the night that I met him, I knew I was in the presence of greatness, and that was Pat Stanton. Yeah. And he sat with my boys, my two boys, actually my three boys. He sat that night. We were invited over for the Rangers game, and I was done a bit of work for the TV and that, and a bit of stuff for Hibs. But I sat in the lounge with him, and I think he was there with I think it was his nephew or grandson maybe that night. But he took real time out for me, and he spoke about my career, and he knew about, when somebody like Pat Stanton mentions about things that you've done, it just makes you feel 10 foot tall.
Yeah.
So if there was one player at Hibs that I'd love to have run out beside, it would have been Pat Stanton.
Brilliant. Charlie asks, if you could add one player from the Hibs teams that you played in into the current one, who would you pick and why? And then he's put, you can't pick yourself.
I'd love to play under David Gray. As I said, I think he's doing a fantastic job. But if I was to pick one of the lads that I've played with throughout my time, to play in that side at the minute, probably in his prime, would have to be Scott Brown.
Yeah.
You know,
When
a prime
Scott Brown was
Scott Brown
quick.
a prime Scott Brown box to box, annoying people, just energetic, just believed in himself, hungry. He was something else before he got that move to Celtic. And listen, if he was a flash in the pan at that time, he wouldn't have been on to being the legend that he's been now at Celtic. So I think a prime Scott Brown would get his way into most sides.
I reckon Boozy would play well in this team as well, you know.
Oh,
Hey,
what
well,
a player
listen,
he was, by the way. Boozy. Oh,
Boozy-
my God, what a player.
Boozy for me probably was the technically Boozy, and that goes without championship or even Northern Ireland national team. Steve Davis was a fantastically technically good footballer, but Guillaume Bouzlin for me, I can always play, and we used to go back and we done this wee game. You kick the ball over under the bin, and whilst we weren't putting, God rest his soul, one of the best that I've ever met at Hibs was Tam McCourt. But whilst we weren't putting Tam under a cold ice bath, we would have been playing this game where you chip the ball into the bin. Bougie could have done it with his eyes closed. I was probably breaking mirrors and breaking sinks, but he was something different.
Next up, Callum is asking the 2007 League Cup winning squad, the 2016 Scottish Cup winning Hibs squad, and this year's Hibs squad. Rank them 1 to 3.
I got asked this question on the Hibs Buzz, was it who would won between the Scottish Cup winners team and our team? You're always going to back your own. You know, you're always going to back your own era. You're always going to back them. I personally fell into the trap that night where I backed us over them. And again, it's one of those, it's open to interpretation. I love watching the current squad. I really do. Winning that Scottish Cup final will go down in history. I think it's just was the holy grail. And on our side, as you said, there was a lot of boys making their way as internationals. There was a lot of boys prime before they got their moves. I think it's unfair to rank them. I think what you've got to do is give it for what it is. That's 3 fantastic eras, and I think we're just blessed to have them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very diplomatic answer.
That's
such a good question,
That's
though.
a
That
politician's
midfield battle.
answer.
That midfield battle would have been unreal. But then who would Lewis Stevenson have played for?
He was with us because we started him off.
Next up, Harvey asks, who was the toughest opponent that you'd ever played against?
Toughest opponent, I suppose in Scotland, you'd quite a few, and I can remember Paul Telfer and me. But always I think that was a Bobo Baldy day. He was a tough wee nut, and you played against certain. You had Hutton at Rangers. You moved down to England, and you had a lot of boys. I can always remember Clint Hull playing for Crystal Palace, and he was probably the dirtiest player that I'd ever met. But he always says to me that either had he knocked me out or he was never catching me, and I can remember he firmly did knock me out one day at Selhurst Park. And Deary, and as he hit me from the side, Deary hit me from the other side, and I can remember getting up playing. You wouldn't get away with it now because I was concussed that day, but I ended up playing the rest of the game. But again, a lot of good left backs that you end up coming across and playing against. But to say playing against the best, I think I would like to say I would show them all respect. And it's very hard to pick out one because when you have a career as long as I've probably had, you meet some good ones. They're all different. You meet ones that are quick, you meet ones that are intelligent, but as I said, it's very hard to split it.
Yeah. Again, like you just said there, it's completely different because you play differently against Clint Hill as you would against Carlos Puyol. You know what I mean? So it's that's
First and only time Carlos Puyol and Clint Hill have ever been mentioned in the same sentence.
Imagine that centre-half pairing. That'd be excellent.
Yeah.
Colin asks, what did Tony Mowbray say to you to make you change your mind to stay at Hibs?
I think he took me into Hibs. Again, a story that probably not many knows. I was going home to Linfield, and it was halfway through, and then he rung me on Wednesday night to my flat, and I had the bags packed. There's no use lying. I had half my cases packed to go, and he rung me and he said, I want to meet you at Easter Road. And I remember him sitting me in the stand at Easter Road, and we sat in the stand, and he just made me look out at the pitch, and it was always one of those ones that I don't know if he minds it, but he says to me, "You've worked so hard up until now, and you know that the hard work's done, and you're gonna probably throw this away for someone that's worked so hard to get so close,
Yeah.
and you never know how this could end up." And it's true words. That happened on the Thursday, and lo and behold, the Saturday was the hat-trick. So if there ever was a bit of genius managing and something that I'll always be internally grateful for, a conversation, a phone call, it was him. So Tony probably made me realise, along with my father-in-law now, my wife's dad, he flew over and stood in the flat down Leith and stood and cried, and basically says, "You've worked so hard for this." And maybe with a tinge of homesickness and maybe just not realising what opportunity was still sitting in my hands that I had, and I was glad for more mature heads and people that probably are a wee bit more wise to the world. But Tony Mowbray to me was someone that that morning, that phone call and that day realising, and as I said then, to come on and do that at Ibrox that Saturday was something you could write, you could show a movie, and that what happened that week to what happened that Saturday was and then following week beating England, that definitely would be up there with Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, exactly. Just another couple before we wrap up. Andrew asks, are you playing in any Hibs charity games anytime soon?
As I said, no plans at the minute to come back over, but always open to any invites or anything. I do as much work for the club as I can when I'm asked. As I said, I keep mentioning Billy's, Billy Lowe at Black Ivy. I've become real good friends with him, and still good friends with the likes of Lewis Stevenson, Scott Brown. My young lad was playing in the Edinburgh Cup, and Scott's wee lad was playing it. We seen each other at the tournament, and open to any time that Hibs need me to do anything and come over and more and Wallen, and really enjoyed the Hibby buzz that night. Darren McGregor was the other one, and Boozy, and getting to meet these new players, and that's something that I really enjoy, and I'm really looking forward. I would love to get over and meet some of the new players, and and speak to them and see how they find things, and that's always a big thing for me is again just meeting new Hibs people, meeting new fans, and now there's a new generation of fans. There'll be a new batch that probably won't be so related to our days back then, but it's all good for me, and sharing more special memories. And my boys will always now look to get over to Easter Road and see this new crop of special players.
Absolutely. And no chance of a wee 6-month stint on the right wing?
I think if you could see me now, I'm 44 now, and I'm still pulling the boots on for the local side here, and I still enjoy that. I still enjoy playing, and you mentioned all those big career highs that you play in them big games, and I remember losing a Fermanagh and Western. This is junior football over here, but it's my local club where I started off, and I remember losing we won an Irish Junior Cup final. I was 42, playing at Windsor Park, and scored 2 in the final. So
that made a big news over here. Actually, this
is the biggest junior cup back over here. So I ended up scoring a couple. So I'm 44 now, but when I was 43, I lost the cup final, and I don't know why, but I stood and cried at 43, and I think a lot of people were amazed to see me crying because of a junior cup. But it's just because when you start off playing football, it's because it means something to you. It doesn't matter because if you're playing a Scottish Cup final or a junior cup final. I think you play to one, and that's just me. And I wear my heart in my sleeve. I'm probably an open book, maybe sometimes too open to a point. But I would rather be remembered for somebody that was approachable. Maybe stepped out of line sometimes because I had a bit of a spark, but somebody would always turn around and say, well, he was a good, honest guy, and that's the way I want to be remembered.
Well, talking about your spark, it leads us really nicely on to our last question, which comes from Dean, and he asks, if you were to have a celebrity boxing match against anyone, who would you want as your opponent? And I thought instantly, I'd like to see you up against Rudy Scatchell. Wouldn't mind that.
I think me and Rudy would make a good one. I think Rudy got the better of me on a few occasions, but we played them against Southampton, played Bristol City down at Ashton Gate. And if you look this up, I'll maybe send you the link. Rudy Scatchell was their goalkeeper, come up for the corner, and Adriano Basso, our Brazilian goalkeeper, caught the ball, and he fired the ball to me in our own half, about just outside our box. So I've knocked this ball, and I was again prime. So Rudy Scatchell's eyes looks at me, and I knocked the ball by him, and I never took as much pleasure as running by somebody that could not catch me. And then I run the full length of the pitch, took the ball in from my own half and tapped it into the net. And a bit like that day, I was looking for Pat to look at him. I wasn't looking for anybody else in the Southampton team. I was looking for Rudy Scatchell.
Oh, you would have been spitting feathers. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, eh? And that wraps us up really, really nicely. Ivan, thank you so much for your time. You know, you've given us an hour 45 of your Friday night, and we really, really appreciate it. It's been amazing to talk to you. Like Craig said, and I said, growing up, you were one of our heroes in a Hibs shirt. So it's quite surreal that we're sitting here and talking to you about your career. Just a big thank you for taking the time out. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no.
Well, listen, I want to thank you too, and all the Hibs fans, as I said, for all the great things that they've done for me. It's reciprocal. Just for I give yous memories. Yous have certainly made me feel when I said when them times when you run the stand without fans in a football stadium, you don't have a sport. So thanks for everything you do, and keep up all your good work with the next batch of people and interviews, because interacting with players and building that bond between fans and players is massive. And I'll always have so much respect for you as a group of fans and the club. And here, listen, maybe the next time we're over, I'll let you know, give you a shout, and we can catch up, and we can maybe get that pint of snake bite somewhere along the line.
We can maybe hear
100%.
your House of the Rising sung karaoke.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. You can hold me to that one.
Perfect. That seems like a real good place to wrap up. So if you've got this far, thank you very much for listening. We are at the Hibs Ramble on all the social medias: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc., etc. And we will speak to you after. I was going to say after the Falkirk game, but we're not playing Falkirk on Saturday. We'll probably catch up after next week's tie against Legia, I think, Craig.
Probably, aye. Just before we wrap up, though, Ivan, again, thanks so much. There's always that saying you should never meet your heroes, but you piss in the wind with that. Honestly, this has been a genuine pleasure. So, aye, thanks so much.
No problem.
Well, thanks very much.
Take care, lads.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's get ready to rumble.